The skin I didn't choose. Chapter 1. The first time I noticed I was different. It wasn't a punch or a slur or even a cruel joke that made me notice. It was something quieter, something smaller. It was second grade. We were doing a group project on family trees, and Mrs. Carter had asked us to bring in pictures of our relatives. I was so excited. I had stayed up late with my mum, choosing the photos, printing them out, labeling each one in my best handwriting. When it was my turn to present, I stood proudly in front of the class, holding up a poster board covered in smiles. My grandfather in his army uniform, my auntie holding a cake, my baby cousin wrapped in a blanket. I talked about each one like they were heroes in my own story. Then I noticed it. A girl in the front row whispered something to the boy beside her. They both looked at me, then at the pictures, then at each other. They laughed, quietly, but it felt loud. I didn't understand why. After class, I asked the boy what was funny. He shrugged. "You don't look like us," he said. "Your family's different." That night, I stared at the poster in my room, trying to figure out what made us different. Was it the clothes, the background, the smiles? Then I saw it. Our skin. That was the first time I understood that some people would see me before they heard me. That before I opened my mouth, the world had already decided something about me. I didn't have a word for it yet, but I felt it. This invisible thing between me and everyone else. This line I hadn't drawn, but somehow lived behind. That was the first time I realized I was different. And I knew it wouldn't be the last. Chapter 2. What they saw before they heard me. It started happening more often after that first moment in second grade. As I got older, I began to notice it wasn't just in school, it was everywhere. At the grocery store, at the park, at the library. People looked. Some quickly turned away when I caught their eye. Others stared a moment too long. They didn't know me, but they thought they did. Once, I stood in line at a store, holding a comic book and a bag of chips. I was maybe 9. A lady behind me shifted her purse to the other shoulder, the one farther from me. She didn't say a word. Another time, I was at the community pool, about to cannonball off the diving board. A little boy in line behind me asked, "Is your skin dirty?" I froze. He wasn't mean, just curious. His mum pulled him aside, red-faced, but it stuck with me. I started to understand something uncomfortable. My skin walked into the room before I did. People saw it, assumed things, built stories around me before I ever opened my mouth. Sometimes I felt like I had to work twice as hard to be heard the way I wanted to be, like I had to be extra polite, extra careful, Once, during a school assembly, a teacher told me to stop talking, except I hadn't said anything. The boy next to me had, but she didn't apologize. She just kept going. What they saw before they heard me was a version of me I never asked for. A version shaped by stereotypes, by news headlines, by whatever fear they hadn't unlearned. And when I finally did speak, I could feel their surprise, as if I had proven something they hadn't expected. But I didn't want to prove anything. I just wanted to be seen as me. Chapter 3. My skin spoke before I could. There were moments I wanted to blend in, moments when I didn't want my skin to say anything at all. But it always did. Before I spoke, before I smiled, before I walked into a room, it had already made an introduction for me. I remember one morning in 4th grade when we were asked to introduce ourselves to a new student. I smiled, extended my hand, and said, "Hi, She interrupted me. "Are you from Africa?" It wasn't mean, just blunt, but it froze me. "No," I said, "I was born here." She tilted her head. "But your skin, it's darker than mine." That moment hung in the air longer than it should have. My teacher smiled and kept the lesson going, but I sat with that question all day. It wasn't just her. It wasn't just that day. My skin was a constant question mark to the world, like it needed explanation, like it needed context, like it was something I was supposed to apologize for or translate. And it kept happening. At birthday parties, do you get darker in the sun? At sleepovers, can you get sunburnt? At the dentist, wow, your gums are really pink under all that skin. My skin spoke, even when I didn't want it to. And when I did speak, people sometimes looked surprised, as if I wasn't supposed to sound the way I did, like I didn't match the voice they'd imagined in their heads. And eventually I stopped speaking up as much, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I was tired of my words having to compete with my appearance. I just wanted to be a kid. But even then, my skin never let me be silent. It was the first thing they noticed, and sometimes the only thing they remembered. Chapter 4. The words they whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. The first time I heard them, I wasn't even supposed to be there. It was during recess, and I had gone back inside to grab my sweater. The hallway was empty, the classroom doors all shut. I walked past the art room and paused when I heard laughter. Inside, 2 boys and a girl stood at the counter, washing brushes. I recognized them. They were in my class. I was just about to keep walking when I heard one of them say my name. I froze. He's always trying so hard. It's like he thinks smiling makes him one of us. Another voice chimed in. My mom said people like him are just angry underneath. They have to be. The third laughed. He probably can't even swim. I backed away from the door, heart pounding, throat tight. People had said things before. Rude, ignorant things, but always when they thought I wasn't listening. That was different. This time I was listening, and it hurt in a new kind of way. I walked back to the playground, sweater forgotten, and sat alone near the fence. The laughter from inside echoed in my head for the rest of the day. I didn't tell anyone, because part of me thought, what if they're right? What if smiling was my way of trying to be accepted? What if I was angry underneath even when I didn't feel it? From that day on, I started to notice how often it happened. In bathrooms, in locker rooms, on bus rides. People whispering when they thought I couldn't hear. Adults too. Supervisors who muttered them under their breath. Teachers who assumed I cheated before they checked. Their words piled up inside me, invisible bricks I carried in my chest. And yet, somehow, I kept smiling. Not because I wanted to fit in, but because I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of watching me break. But some days, I came home and screamed into my pillow, because the words you aren't supposed to hear are the ones you never forget. Chapter 5. When the mirror felt like a lie. It was around middle school when I started spending more time in front of the mirror. Not out of vanity, but out of confusion. I'd stare at my face, trying to recognize it, trying to figure out why it didn't always feel like mine. Some days I'd look at my reflection and wonder if it looked too dark, too tired, too different. Other days, I'd tilt my head and ask myself if I was trying too hard to look like everyone else. I'd experiment with hair gel, lotion, facial expressions. I'd push my lips together and raise my eyebrows like the kids on the Disney Channel. I'd lower my voice and test how I sounded saying certain words. I would compare myself to the kids on TV, in magazines, even the animated ones. I'd hold my arm up next to theirs, my nose, my lips, my hair. I learned how to angle my face to match what I thought looked less threatening. I learned to smile even when it felt forced, just to seem like I belonged. The mirror became a battleground. It was where I practiced my smile to make sure it looked welcoming, not threatening. Where I stood shirtless and pinched my sides, wondering if I looked too wide, too tall, too much. It was where I tried different hairstyles, hoping maybe this one would make me look more approachable. I even asked my mom for products to straighten my hair once. She asked why. I said, just curious, but deep down, I wasn't curious. I was desperate. It was where I pulled at my skin, wondering what it would be like if I had been born with another tone. Not because I wanted to erase who I was, but because I was tired of being treated like I was wrong. One day, I overheard someone at school call me intimidating. I laughed when I got home. Intimidating? I was quiet, polite. I said thank you too often and apologized when someone bumped into me. But in their eyes, my skin gave me a weight I never agreed to carry. I sat in front of the mirror that night for what felt like an hour, practicing being smaller, smiling softer, standing straighter. I didn't want to disappear. I just didn't want to be judged before I had a chance to speak. So I went back to the mirror. He tried again, smiled again, and wondered if I'd ever see myself without first seeing their assumptions. That's when the mirror started to feel like a lie, not because it didn't show me the truth, but because the world kept trying to rewrite what that truth meant. Chapter 6. The joke that wasn't funny. It was lunchtime, 7th grade. The cafeteria smelled like stale pizza and overcooked carrots, and I was sitting with the same group of classmates I had eaten with for most of the year. We weren't exactly friends, but we weren't strangers either. Just a mix of kids brought together by seating patterns and mutual quietness. One of the boys, Mason, had just come back from getting chocolate milk. He dropped his tray, sat down, and grinned. "Hey," he said, looking at me. "What do you call a black kid with straight A's?" I froze. My stomach turned cold. Before I could say anything, he answered himself. "A liar?" The table burst into laughter. Not all of them, but enough. I laughed too. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. My laugh sounded strange. Like it didn't belong to me. Like I had borrowed it from someone who hadn't just been stabbed with a joke. The rest of lunch went on like nothing happened. But something had happened. I went home that day and replayed it over and over. Why had I laughed? Why hadn't I said something, reported him, walked away? Because in that moment, I wasn't trying to be brave. I was trying to survive. The next day, Mason greeted me like usual, like the joke had never happened, and I let him. But something inside me cracked. It wasn't just the joke. It was that no one else had said anything either. Not the girl sitting next to me, not the boy who always shared his fruit snacks. Silence has a weight, and I carried it for weeks. That was the day I learned that sometimes the worst jokes aren't the loudest. They're the ones that echo in your head long after the laughter ends. Chapter 7. Why I started walking with my head down. It didn't happen all at once. I didn't just wake up one day and decide to lower my gaze. It was gradual. It started with hallways. When I noticed the eyes. Not everyone's, just a few, staring too long or turning too quickly, the kind that made you wonder what they were thinking. Then came the comments. Why do you always look so serious? You don't have to glare all the time. I wasn't glaring, I was just existing. But their voices planted seeds. I began to walk differently, shoulders a little tighter, steps a little smaller, eyes no longer scanning the room but fixed on the floor. Because if I didn't look up, I wouldn't catch their stares. I wouldn't hear the whispers. Once, in gym class, someone bumped into me and muttered, "Watch it, bro." Not with anger, but with assumption. As if I had meant harm just by standing there. Another time, I walked into a store and the clerk followed me with his eyes. Every aisle, every step. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but that didn't matter. So I walked with my head down, not because I was ashamed of who I was, but because I was tired. Tired of defending my presence in spaces that should have welcomed me. Some days, I'd pass mirrors in school or shop windows and see a version of myself that didn't feel real. Shoulders hunched, eyes low, like I was trying to shrink. It wasn't just about fear, it was about exhaustion. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to walk into a room with my head high. Because when you're told, silently or otherwise, that you're a threat before you're a person, you start to make yourself smaller just to feel safe. Chapter 8. The Teacher Who Said Nothing. It was 8th grade, and we were reading aloud in class. The book had a character who looked like me, spoke like me, faced things I was starting to understand. When the teacher handed out the pages for each student to read, I was excited. Nervous, too, but excited. Then it happened. The boy reading the part with the character who looked like me decided to change the way he spoke. He exaggerated every word, used a fake accent, slurred his words, made the voice sound uneducated, mocking. The class laughed. I looked up at the teacher, waiting for her to say something. She didn't. She smiled, then said, "Let's keep going." That moment burned into me like a brand, because it wasn't just what the boy did. It was that no one stopped him, that someone in charge, someone who was supposed to protect me, chose silence. After class, I sat in the bathroom stall and stared at my shoes, not crying, just empty. It wasn't the first time. There was the time I got called a name in the hallway and reported it. Nothing happened. There was the time a group of boys cornered me after gym and said they were just joking. No one followed up. Every silence became a message that my dignity was optional. I started raising my hand less. I started choosing seats in the back of the class. I started giving answers I didn't believe in just to avoid being looked at too long. That teacher probably forgot about that day. But I didn't. Because when you're not defended, you learn to build your own shields, even when they are heavy. Chapter 9. The day I wiped the dirt, not the stain. I was in 9th grade when it happened. We were coming in from PE, sweaty and dusty from playing soccer on the field. I had wiped my hands on my shorts, not thinking twice. As I walked into the locker room, one of the other boys looked at me, wrinkled his nose and said, "You should probably wash that dirt off your skin." He said it loud enough for a few others to hear. One of them laughed. I paused. I looked down at my hands. There was some dirt, sure, but that wasn't what he meant. I could hear it in his voice, the way he said that dirt. The way he looked at me like my skin was the thing that needed scrubbing. I walked to the nearest sink, turned on the water, and started to wash my hands. But I didn't stop there. I kept scrubbing. Harder. Up my arms, my wrists. I grabbed paper towels and rubbed my skin until it turned red. I knew it wouldn't change anything. But in that moment, I needed to do something. I needed to feel like I had some control over the way they saw me, even if it was a lie. When I got home, I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My arms were raw. The dirt was gone. But the stain, that invisible stain, the one they projected onto me, was still there. And for the first time I said it out loud. It's not me who's dirty, it's the way they look at me. That day didn't break me, but it left a mark. Not on my skin, on the part of me that still wonders how many others have tried to wipe away something that was never theirs to carry. Chapter 10. When I tried to scrub it away. There are moments you carry in your body even when the memory fades. This one stayed in my hands. It was the night after that locker room comment. I had gone home, eaten dinner quietly, and disappeared into the bathroom without a word. I turned on the faucet. The water ran hot, almost too hot, but I didn't care. I rolled up my sleeves and I started to scrub, first with soap, then with a rough washcloth, then with a loofah my mum used for exfoliating. I don't know how long I was in there. My fingers turned wrinkled, my skin flushed red, my wrists ached, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to feel clean. Not from dirt, but from judgment, from assumptions, from the way their words clung to me like grease I couldn't rinse away. I started to scrub my arms, then my shoulders, my chest, as if I could reach inside and pull something out that didn't belong. The mirror fogged, but I didn't wipe it. I didn't want to see myself until I was sure something had changed. Something had softened. Something had been erased. But when the mirror finally cleared, my face looked back at me, damp with steam and shame, eyes bloodshot, not from crying, but from burning silence. That night, I opened the cabinet under the sink and found a small bottle of facial bleach. I remembered my mom saying it was for fading dark spots. And in that moment I wondered, if it could fade spots, could it fade me? I never opened it, but I held it for a long time. I thought about the first time someone made me feel less than, the second, the 10th, the 100th. Each time I stayed silent, swallowed it, let it settle into my skin like invisible ink. And in my reflection, I didn't see someone who hated his skin. I saw someone who hated what it brought with it, how it turned heads for the wrong reasons, how it made him work twice as hard to feel half as seen. When I finally put the bottle back, my hands were still shaking. Not from anger, from exhaustion. I turned off the faucet. The room was still and damp, the air heavy. I wrapped myself in a towel and sat on the floor for a while, just breathing, not fixing, not fighting, just trying to remember that I was still here. That was the night I realized I hadn't just been trying to scrub away dirt. I was trying to scrub away something that wasn't ever mine to begin with. The way the world saw me. And that's a stain no soap can reach. Chapter 11. My name in their mouths never sounded right. They never said it right. Not once. Not in roll call, not in class, not in conversation. They'd pause before it, glance at the paper like they were trying to decode a foreign language, then say it with hesitation, or worse, confidence, but the wrong way. It's not that hard, I wanted to say. I said it in my head, over and over, but out loud, I'd just give a tight-lipped nod or correct them softly. Sometimes they'd say sorry. Sometimes they wouldn't even notice. One teacher turned my name into a nickname I never asked for. She used it all year. I stopped correcting her after the second week. But the worst part wasn't the mispronunciation. It was the tone. The way they'd say my name like it was a question mark, like it didn't belong, like it was an inconvenience to pronounce correctly. I started saying my name before they could butcher it. I'd jump in during roll call, quick, smiling, trying to save us both from the awkward moment. But every time they got it wrong, it chipped away at something. A piece of me that felt unseen, reduced. My name wasn't just syllables. It was history, family, culture. It was mine. And when they changed it, shortened it, made it a joke, they weren't just changing a word. They were changing the way I existed in the room. One day, a substitute looked up and said, "Wow, that's a mouthful." The class laughed. Because I wasn't a punchline. I was a person. And all I ever wanted was to hear my name said like it mattered. Chapter 12. The friend who didn't stay a friend. His name was Jake. We met in 5th grade and clicked fast. Trading snacks at lunch, sitting next to each other on field trips, building forts out of cardboard boxes after school. For a while, it didn't matter that we looked different. We liked the same jokes, the same cartoons, the same Pokemon cards. That was enough. But as we got older, something started to shift. In 7th grade, we were assigned a group project. I noticed that Jake's voice got quieter when he talked to me in front of the others. He stopped inviting me to his house, even though I still invited him to mine. One day, I heard him say to another classmate, "I mean, yeah, we're cool, but he's not like one of us." That sentence did something to me. I asked him about it after school. He shrugged and said, "You know what I meant." But I didn't. Or maybe I did, and I didn't want to believe it. The truth was, Jake started choosing comfort over friendship. He didn't want to be the one defending me when someone made a comment. He didn't want to correct his new friends when they made jokes. I knew he didn't laugh at when we were alone. The last time we talked, I asked him, "Did I do something wrong?" He looked away. "No, I just have different friends now." I nodded. And that was it. The part that hurt most wasn't losing Jake. It was realizing that when the world started treating me differently, he let it. He didn't say anything. He didn't stand by me. He just stepped back, slowly but completely. And I learned that some friendships are real until they're inconvenient. And some people will only stay by your side until your presence costs them comfort. Chapter 13. The skin they feared, the pain I carried. Fear is a strange thing. It can be loud, screaming, charging, violent, or it can be quiet, subtle, the kind that follows you into a store, watches you across a parking lot, grips a purse tighter as you pass. My skin invited that second kind of fear, the quiet kind, the kind people think you don't notice. There was a time I walked down the street near my school and heard the familiar click of car doors locking. I wasn't doing anything, just walking, just being. At a gas station once, I waited in line to pay while the woman behind the counter asked the person in front of me about their day. When it was my turn, she just said, "Is that all?" That pain isn't sharp, it's slow, it seeps in, you carry it like background noise humming in your chest. I remember a night I wore a hoodie, hands in my pockets, earbuds in, walking home from a friend's house. A police car pulled up. The officer didn't accuse me of anything, he just stared. Asked where I was going, what I was doing, why I had my hands in my pockets. I answered politely, calmly, the way I'd been taught, because my skin didn't give me the benefit of the doubt. Later, I stood in the bathroom, looking at myself, at the same skin that made people cross streets, flinch slightly, ask questions they wouldn't ask someone else. And I felt it, the pain of having to make myself smaller, safer, palatable, not because of who I was, but because of what they saw. They feared my skin, but I was the one carrying the pain. Chapter 14. The poem I was never brave enough to read out loud. I wrote it in 10th grade. We were given an assignment to write a personal poem and read it in front of the class. It could be about anything, a memory, a person, a feeling. I remember staring at the blank page for an hour, unsure if I should say what I wanted to say, unsure if I could. But then the words came, like water breaking through a dam. I wrote about my skin. I wrote about how it felt to be followed, how it felt to be questioned, how it felt to be invisible and too visible at the same time. I wrote about my name being mispronounced, about the ache of hearing laughter when I didn't understand the joke, about how exhausting it was to carry a weight that others pretended didn't exist. It was the most honest thing I had ever written, and when the day came to read it aloud, I folded it neatly and kept it in my pocket. When my name was called, I stood up. I walked to the front of the classroom, and I read a different poem, something safe, something forgettable, because the real poem felt too raw, too much. I wasn't ready for their eyes. I wasn't ready to be seen in that way. After class, I went to the bathroom and pulled out the folded poem. I read it again, just to myself, my own voice echoing off the tiled walls. It made me cry, quietly, not out of sadness, but out of frustration, because I had something to say, and I couldn't say it. That poem lived in my notebook for years. It moved with me, through schools, through homes, through time. And every now and then, I'd take it out, read it, and remind myself, one day I will read this out loud, and I won't flinch when they listen. Chapter 15. The day I finally said, "This skin is mine." It didn't happen during a protest, or a speech, or a classroom debate. It happened on a regular afternoon. I was walking past a shop window, wearing a hoodie, earbuds in, watching the world pass me by. For once, no one stared, no one moved away, no one locked their car. And I saw my reflection. Something about that moment stopped me. Maybe it was the light, maybe it was the calm, maybe it was because I looked, really looked, at myself and didn't flinch. I didn't see someone who had to explain himself. I didn't see someone carrying shame. I didn't see someone trying to be smaller to make others more comfortable. I saw a person who had survived every whisper, every glance, every joke, every silence. I saw a person whose skin had become a battlefield and who had finally stopped apologizing for being the one standing on it. That night, I took out the poem, the real one, and I read it. Not in front of a crowd, not on a stage, just in my room, out loud, no whisper, no edits, no shame. And as I read, something lifted, not all of it, not forever, but enough. Enough to make space. Enough to finally believe that my skin wasn't a burden, that it wasn't something to hide, that it wasn't something I needed permission to belong in. Later that evening, I went outside. The sky was dark, the stars faint. I sat on the porch and felt the night air on my face. A neighbor walked by, nodded politely. For once, I didn't wonder what he thought. I just nodded back. The next day at school, I wore my favorite shirt, the bright one, the one that made me feel seen. Someone said, "That color really stands out on you." And I smiled, not with apology, not with self-consciousness, just a smile. At lunch, I recited a few lines of my poem quietly to a friend. She didn't flinch. She didn't change the subject. She asked me to read more, and I did. For the first time, I saw that being honest didn't have to mean being alone. I whispered to the reflection in the darkened window, "This skin is mine." And for the first time, I said it without needing anyone to believe it but me. That was the day I began to walk differently. Not faster, not softer, but like someone who had arrived and didn't need to ask for space anymore, because that space was always mine, and now I claimed it.